Hello and welcome. My name is Penelope Ferguson. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm also a certified GAPS practitioner. Today I'm joined by some of my GAPS practitioners. I have Mary Lynn Lipscomb and Gina Phelps, and we're all certified GAPS practitioners, and we are going to do a food demonstration on bone broth and do some other techniques. Okay? Mary Lynn.
I just want to introduce you to our series of episodes on GAPS, which is an acronym for Gut and Psychology Syndrome. In previous episodes, we have talked about some of the general concepts and principles that underlie GAPS, and this, just to remind you, is a protocol that was created by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, and that protocol is aimed at healing and sealing the gut and addressing some of the chronic health problems that may occur when a person has leaky gut. And so in previous episodes we've talked about that. We've had a young mother who told her story about using this protocol to heal her family and to address some of their chronic issues. We have also demonstrated a full GAPS meal, some of the foods that would be included, and so today we're going to demonstrate how to make stock and bone broth. Penelope.
Thank you very much. I have been here before about 2 years ago and done a demonstration on bone broth, and bone broth has been part of my life since I was a child. I mean, it was just how we were raised. Whenever there was anything left over, it went into the stock pot. So bone broth is a traditional broth throughout all the generations back into caveman days or whatever, because nothing went to waste. And once they had a harvest and they had the meats and so on, they also used those bones. And the bones are extremely nourishing and part of the mineral replacement system for our bodies. So, all right, I'm going to be demonstrating some bone broth, and then my colleagues are going to be doing some extra things all along the way. So first thing is I'm going to show you what I started last night. I have some turkey, some turkey bones that I have done some things to, but here's my turkey bones. I have some carrots and celery and onions in my stock there that have been roasted for at least an hour. They have caramelized. They have gotten into a very, very rich state. If you could smell them here, I've got them cooking a little bit more. And when I finished last night, I went ahead and took out the little bits from the roasting pan that I had. And here is a very, very dark broth. And this is part of the caramelized bits and pieces that were in the thing. And this is going to make my bone broth a bit dark and have a whole lot more flavor. And this is the flavor, it's healing, but it's also the flavor as you start cooking that you will start noticing the intensity of why your soup and your stew is a little bit better than anyone else's. So one of the most important things that when you start bone broth and start meat on some of the meat stocks and things like that is that you add some vinegar. About a tablespoon or so of vinegar will start the leaching process. The vinegar is an acid, and the bones are pretty inert for right then, and then it starts pulling out the trace minerals and calcium and so on out of the bone. It's pretty important that we, as humans, get calcium and magnesium and zinc and boron. And sometimes you don't get it in the foods that you get, but you get it from the bones. Isn't that right?
Now, that's right, Penelope, and I'm just looking, admiring some of the stock and the broth that you made over here. Tell me just a little bit about this one.
This is beef broth. I had the roasted vegetables with that, so it's a beef broth, and it has a little bit of fat on top that I am not going to throw away because the fat has captured some of the nutrients that have come off that beef broth, especially some of the fat-soluble vitamins, especially vitamin A. Vitamin A from the animal products is the type of vitamin A that our bodies can use. We talk about carrots giving us vitamin A, but carrots give us a precursor to vitamin A. And so we want the bone broth that has some of the fat on it, and this all is part of the GAPS protocol.
Now, Penelope, sometimes when I make my broth, I'll have a thick layer of hard fat on top of it when I take it out of the refrigerator. Should I discard that and throw that away?
No, that's the saturated fat. It is, one of the most important things about making bone broth is that it needs to be local, grass-fed, and organic. And the animals are bio-nutrient concentrators for us. So they have, especially cattle, they have several stomachs that food goes through and food goes through and food goes through some more. And so then that food gets delivered to their body. So for us to capture the nutrition from cattle and some of the other animals, it has to have the fat. And the fat is a saturated fat. And that saturated fat, it's again animal to animal, and it adds structure to our bodies. So that the cell membranes and our brain membranes need structural fats. They do not need highly processed, what I call polyoils. So working back to how it was before 1955, where pre-1955, where it was the animal fats. And this is what our emphasis is in the GAPS diet. Getting away from highly processed foods, getting away from the modern technology of things, and putting yourself back in the kitchen. We're having a little bit of a good time here with our demonstration, but it doesn't take that long. And once you've done bone broth a couple times, it's like put it on in the morning and you forget it. That's all there is to it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to, actually I'm going to add some raw bones to this, and I'm going to go ahead and work on boning out some turkey thighs. Turkey thighs I get at the grocery store, and they're pretty much available all year round, and they can be natural. I mean, usually they're natural or organic, and I get them, and I can make a small amount of bone broth, or I can make a large amount of bone broth. By the time I get home tonight and put all these things together, I'll have like a 20-quart stock pot. But you know what? It's money in the bank for me, and it's health in the bank for me.
So, Gina, this seems like it could be fairly simple to do, and I've made stock and broth a lot, but for our viewing audience, tell them why they might want to go to all the trouble, as Penelope has said, but reiterate a little more about what is the benefit of these stocks and broths?
Well, one of the biggest benefits that that they found over the years is that the broth has gelatin and collagen in it, and the gelatin properties, it's actually called a hydrophilic in your system, and it actually allows liquids and waters to be digested in your body. It draws water to it. So it draws water to our skin, draws water and liquids to our joints. So it actually nourishes our skin, it nourishes our body, it nourishes our joints, and it helps the digestion process speed up. So we're getting, the broth itself has some amino acids in it, but it doesn't have, it's not a complete protein, so it helps in the protein digestion as we're actually drinking the broth. So for us, for our family, we drink broth every morning. In the morning, we add a little cultured sour cream to it, little sea salt that Penelope will demonstrate. And then we'll sometimes have it with our meals also. A half a cup is really all you need with your meals. Mm. And at least that's how we do it. And sometimes in the afternoon, my husband will say, gee, can we have some broth? And he likes to have a little squirt of lemon, and I'll take a whole piece of garlic and we'll grate it, some raw garlic, make sure I'm not going anywhere that night. But it's just a wonderful, nourishing, warm drink. Instead of coffee, tea, something like that, we just use it as a substitute.
One of the things that Dr. Oz has made famous is this leaky gut syndrome. Well, to make the leaky gut syndrome heal, you have to have the nourishing foods, and the nourishing foods includes bone broth. Okay, I have boned out one of these turkey thighs, and I'm going to bone out another one right now. And it's really not hard. You just take your knife and you just run it along the bone, and you slide it down the bone, and sometimes you just sort of pull it away. With the bone, you try to keep that knuckle and any of those collagen joints and things like that, and this is what is the healing property. For people that have joint problems and so on, it becomes, this is also healing. We take shark whatever that stuff is called, chondroitin. Well, guess what? You could be eating it all along. I'm going to ask Gina to hand me one of the large knives, and I'm going to break into the bones. You have to hack so that you're hacking so that when it gets into the vinegar water, it's going to be actually working, doing its work even more. So I know this is, sometimes it could be fun time for you. So anyhow, I've got lacerated thigh bone of turkey. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to get rid of these gloves.
Penelope, can you just tell us a little bit about perhaps the other bones as you're preparing these turkey bones? I noticed that you have some other bones here that may be used.
Okay. Well, I have these are beef rib bones. They're very fatty. They got the fatty streaklings streaks through there. They've got some marrow. The marrow is in here, and these will add a lot of body to the broth when you finish making it. So that sometimes you can see thin broth, or if you buy a packaged box broth, it will always be thin. The broth that we have, take the little dark one, will have body to it. It'll have its own gelatin, its own natural gelatin to it. It is a lot thicker. So I have all these things, and once these cook up, you can have your own little treat, or shred off the meat and put it into your soups, or put it into a sauce or something like that. And I also have a pig's feet, or a pig's foot, I guess. And the pig's foot will add a lot of collagen and so on, and a lot of flavor and some fat, not as much as other, but it'll go into like beans, or if I cook greens a lot, and so something like that. And you think, these are all the things they've told us over the years not to do. Guess what? We have to realize that we have an obesity problem, we have a diabetes problem, we have some other things. What have we changed in our diet? We have changed the types of fats that's been in our diet, and we've changed the quality of the foods that we've eaten. We've gone to fast foods and so on, and that's not where we need to be. We need to be going back and looking and studying the old generations. And I'm going to throw it, I need to do some things with my broth right now, so I'm going to ask Mary Lynn to tell about simple sugars and things. Simple sugars and things.
Well, one of the things that you do want to remember is simply preparing and drinking stock and broth is certainly not going to completely heal the body. You definitely want to assist the digestive tract in other ways, and a main way to do that is to remove grains from the diet, at least while you're healing. The grains that you would be consuming if you did not have digestive issues or a leaky gut would need to be fermented if you were to consume them. But we'll focus now on just a person who might be trying to restore their health by healing the gut wall. And so grains, all grains would be out of the diet, and that includes rice. I know a lot of people are on a gluten-free diet, and they will resort to a lot of foods that have rice or rice flour. But with the GAPS protocol, you do need to remove grains, and you do need to remove all sugars with the exception of honey. Raw honey is left in the diet. And so this is an important aspect of the GAPS diet to sort of give the digestive tract, if you will, a holiday or a vacation. It's one of the things that's important, especially if you have chronic diarrhea, inflammation in the GI tract. The soothing nature of the stocks and broths is just incredible. And not only that, just the extra nutrition, the vitamins and the minerals that you're getting from this very simple food is very important. But I'm guessing that our viewers may want to know, Gina, why not just go to the store and buy a can of stock, a box of broth, or some dry granules? Why not just do that? Isn't that easier?
Well, it is easier, but again, if you look at the ingredient list on the dry products that you could get from the grocery store, they tend to be about 10 or 15 products long, and there is something called natural flavor, natural chicken flavor, natural beef flavor. Unfortunately, that typically has monosodium glutamate in it. It'll have sugars in it. it's lots of salt in it, and it may not be the kind of the sea salt or the Himalayan salt that we like to use. It may be an iodized salt, which is going to hold fluid into our body. So this broth, the only thing that's in there is natural meats, natural water, good spring water. And I did want to mention, Penelope, you have your vinegar's brown. Can you tell us a little bit why you're using that instead of white vinegar?
Actually, it's not just brown, it's cloudy. And it's cloudy because it has a little bit of what they call mother in there. And this is because it's organic. And it has the natural properties, and it's an apple cider vinegar. And that's what, anything I try to use when I cook is always organic. So right now I'm going to ask you to start chopping up in that rough chop the celery and things, because I'm going to at least have the basis of starting out on a fish broth. Now, the fish broth is this one. It's a milky, a little bit more milky in color and in quality, and so, and it does have a little body. It's just not completely watery, and so on. And this is the one thing about fish broth that I like is that when I do get fish to cook, cod or wild caught fish and so on to cook, I can poach it or boil it, whatever you want to call, in this, and then and that just seasons back to another set of stock that I have. So you can perpetuate using fish broth. I don't have many other ways to use fish broth other than to be poaching in how I cook my fish. Do you have any other ways that you use fish? Well, Gina has a way of how she uses fish.
Well, I grew up in New England, and one of our favorite stews during the summer, during the winter, was oyster stew, or shrimp chowder. Grew up with a lot of chowders. I called it chowder. And so this fish broth becomes the basis of all the fish soups that I make. One of my favorite Christmas Eve soups for my family is a tomato-based fish soup, and we use the fish broth, and it just gives it wonderful depth of flavor. But you know, the fish broth is really important because you're using the head of the fish, and so you're not only getting the calcium and the minerals from the bones, but you're also getting the thyroid from that fish and the iodine from the fish. So people that have iodine deficiencies and hypothyroidism, this is a wonderful, wonderful broth to be consuming on a weekly basis, especially, that will, again, help nourish our bodies. And we wouldn't get that if we were opening a can of whatever brand of clam chowder that's out there.
I don't know that there is any fish broth available. Here's a fish. This is a flounder, and you could almost read through it. I went to my fish market. I live in Harrisonburg, so I went to my fish market, and the guy says he doesn't fillet, but he can get them from his purveyor, supplier, and so I get. It's no problem. It's only about $1 or so a fish skeleton. I think it's worth the transportation and so on. If you'll pass me the veggies over there, I'll start adding some things in.
Okay.
Usually with the fish broth, I'll add a bay leaf. Okay. I've added a bay leaf, and then I just add the raw vegetables. Again, this is called rough cut. They're just chopped, and they add flavor. They add flavor to the fish, and you end up with this wonderful broth. Usually a few. Go ahead, thank you. A few peppercorns, again, to add some extra depth and so on. Now, the one thing that about GAP's diet is they really emphasize the use of onions, and in some of the recipes or some of the ways to help heal is she'll say chop up an onion and saute it for 20 minutes in butter or ghee, and then eat it with your morning eggs and eat it with these things. It's sulfur. Our bodies are very much needing sulfur these days, and so the sulfur within the GI system becomes very, very healing. And that's why onions and garlic are used quite a bit in the GAPS diet. And so every week I get a 3-pound bag of organic onions that I just chop away. I also, on the regular bone broth, I'm adding I always add a bay leaf or two, and then the black pepper. I don't add salt until the very end, because I may be cooking my stock 18, 20 hours so that I can get it down until the bones almost break apart. And with that, the salt would concentrate and be too much. I'd wait till towards the end before I add anything. One of the other ways that you can be economical and make your own broth is to use a roasted turkey carcass or a roasted chicken. So you have the leftovers of a chicken or a turkey. I think this was my Thanksgiving or my Christmas turkey, and it still has a little bit of meat on it. And so once I boil this down, I'll have a little bit of meat to put in a stew and something, and I will still add vinegar to. I have left the skin on. The skin is on. It will get into the pot, into the water and everything, and we'll add flavor. And just the other night, I went to a chili fest, and we had a little chili cook-off, and I had my dark bone broths and so on. And I was very proud to say that I thought my chili was the best chili there. It was a GAPS-friendly chili, thank you very much. But everybody else, I don't know how they made it. That's okay. That's not the issue. But the fact that I had the richness in there was, to me, very, very important. And I know it added the depth to it. So,
Penelope, can I interrupt here? If you didn't have, say, how do you manage an 18-hour pot of stock?
Well, my hot plate I can set for 20 hours or 30 hours. And so I actually cook my stock in the garage. When you get that stuff boiling, sometimes you do get a little bit overwhelmed in flavors and so on. So I leave mine in the garage, and I leave it overnight. I can set it at a temperature, and it stays at that temperature the entire time. And I may have chicken, I may have a fish stock and turkey stock going all at the same time. And it's no problem. I have 2 hot plates, and I go back and forth.
How about you, Mary Lynn? What do you put yours in?
Well, I do cook mine in my kitchen on the stove top, but you raise a good question that I think we haven't covered, and that is, how long do we cook each of these? Like, this is not an 18-hour stock, this delicate fish. Fish is, but perhaps the beef is a different time. So Penelope, what's the time we're looking at for cooking chicken stock or turkey stock versus beef versus fish?
Well, the raw items I cook longer. I cook the roasted bone stock at least 18 hours, and sometimes longer than that. For the pre-roasted, like turkey carcass stock, I may only do 8 to 10 hours. And for the fish stock, I don't think I've ever done more than about 4 hours, because it falls apart. It simply falls apart, and you actually have to sort of put it in a sieve to get the particles out and so on. But it is wonderful. And then when you have them, then you freeze them. I freeze all of my stocks, and I freeze them in glass jars so that I'm not getting any of the BPA plasticized things in my food. So everything, my freezer is stacked with jars with stock in it, and with my eye, I can tell which is my chicken, which is my turkey, which is my beef, which is my fish, and so on. And I'm pulling my stock all the time, but then I'm also cooking all the time too.
Now I do make mine a little differently. I use a crock pot. I find that I don't have time to monitor it, and I haven't really thought about the hot plate, so that's really a nice idea. But I take a crock pot. I have a 6-quart crock pot, and I'll put the carcass. I normally take a full chicken that we've actually raised in our backyard last summer, and we have them free-ranging in our yard. And we'll bake it or cook it ahead of time, and then I take the meat off, and I'll take all the juice that's come from the baking and all the skin and everything and put it in that crock pot, and then fill it with the water and the vinegar. And I let it cook for about 12 hours overnight, again outside, because a lot of times I'll wake up about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning starving because I'm smelling broth, which is wonderful. But I do that with my beef, and I do it with my chicken. I normally have a pot. I tend to make a pot a week, so I end up with about 5 quarts. So sometimes I need about 5 quarts a week for my husband and I. That's what we kind of go, and then we make another one the next week and the next week. So The other thought is that you may have heard about continuous broth, where a lot of people will actually reuse the bones 2 or 3 times to the point where they become so, the flavor is not there anymore so much, but still the minerals and the gelatin are still there for you to use. So just another way of using that.
I call that waste not, want not.
Exactly.
Some of these things may seem expensive, but the very fact that you're using and recycling and you're getting every bit of nutrients that's for your health is pretty important.
Another thing I'll just insert just along that line in saving money and making different kinds of stocks, I love to go to my local farmer who has wonderful broilers and roasting birds and fed really high quality feed. And I love to buy the bags full of chicken backs, chicken necks, chicken feet, chicken wings, and these are the cheaper cuts usually, and make chicken broth using that, simply because that is a less expensive option. And so if you want to make a lot of stock, sometimes getting those parts, and then to get a whole chicken and roast it like Penelope has said, and then to make a bone broth from the carcass is just a wonderful way to really stretch your dollars when you're trying to make stocks and broths, and I really love to do it that way. So it's really, this protocol does not involve a lot of expensive food, but the food does need to be high quality in terms of the way the animals are raised, the type of feed they're fed, the vegetables without pesticides and herbicides and chemical fertilizers, and that may be organic or it may not be, depending on the farmer. So it's very high quality food. It's very nourishing, very healing food.
Absolutely.
And that it is, and that's the bottom line. If you are interested in these recipes, the 2 recipes, I have a raw bone broth recipe, and then I have a cooked carcass recipe. It says turkey, but that's okay. You can change it to chicken and so on, and explore around. Contact us at gapsguides@gmail.com, and we will electronically send you a copy of the different bone broth recipes. That's no big deal for us. Actually, we have these recipes. They're so in our heads. And you think back to your mothers, your grandmothers, and your great-grandmothers. This is what they did, and this continuous bone broth, it was on the back of the stove, and it just kept on going. And so when the guys came in from the fields, they were hot or they were cold or whatever they were, they said, give me something. And a lot of times they would siphon off some of the liquid off of the soup, or even go ahead and give them some of the soup, and it was a replenisher for them. And in fact, when I've talked to people about athletes and different kind of power drinks and so on, what we need is, again, animal to animal. And so the best sort of electrolyte thing will be the bone broth.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank everybody for viewing with us today, and look forward to one of our next episodes where we are going to be showing how we use our bone broth in our stock in an everyday meal. So thank you again for Penelope, for Mary Lynn, and we will see you in our future episodes.